things you don't really need to know, but probably should. I'm Ciara Revan, and this is the Sunday 7.
On this week's award-winning Sunday 7, we learn about a term that's been hitting the headlines this week, medical misogyny, and how it's impacting women's health. Have a go at cracking the Intelligence, Cyber and Security Agency Christmas puzzle. And Will Guyatt tells us what's been trending online in 2024. And remember, if you're enjoying the episode, please do give us a like and follow. We're here 7 days a week at 7 a.m. with the Smart 7, with the 7 biggest stories every morning. But first, it was on this day in 1612 that German astronomer Simon Marius peeked through his telescope and became the first person to spot another galaxy. Marius was quite the stargazing pioneer, known for publishing his yearly astronomical tables and his sharp celestial observations. He poetically described the Andromeda galaxy as the flame of a candle seen through horn, which basically meant faint and pretty exciting to see for the first time. A parliamentary report this week revealed the realities of medical misogyny in the UK, which is leaving women with undiagnosed conditions and in needless pain. It found that conditions like endometriosis and adenomyosis aren't treated with adequate care, leaving women subject to sex-based medical discrimination. The Women and Equalities Committee report cited a clear lack of awareness and understanding of women's reproductive health. It called on the Department of Health and Social Care to improve by increasing funding, incentivising professionals into women's health and making obstetrics and gynecology mandatory in training. Sarah Owen spoke about how widespread the problem is within healthcare. She's the Labour MP for Luton North and chairs the committee.
How many men would be able to go through an IUD fitting, a coil fitting without any pain relief? It just wouldn't happen. A hysteroscopy, which is another part of the report's findings, is that women are going through processes and investigative processes through excruciating pain. It just wouldn't happen. And absolutely, that's why we've said there's medical misogyny, because we can't describe it as anything but.
She was joined in Good Morning Britain by previous I'm a Celeb Queen Vicky Pattison this week. Vicky spoke about her experiences in medical settings when seeking help for premenstrual dysphoric disorder.
My experiences when I went to discuss my symptoms were horrendous. For years, for 5 years, I was dismissed. I was made to feel ashamed. For the majority of the time, it was men. I think they lack an understanding and empathy towards what we're going through as women, whether that be someone suffering with PMDD, adenomyosis, endometriosis. The list is absolutely endless. They are not given the correct, I think, information, education to be able to treat a woman going through what those women are.
Dr. Aziza Sesay is an NHS GP. She also discusses women's health online and spoke about why gender-based issues can so commonly be overlooked.
We gaslight ourselves. You know, it's hard enough for us to come forward and say that there's something wrong, but majority of the times, because of that narrative that women are supposed to be strong, and it's almost like a given that we're meant to endure pain, that just comes as a status quo.
Other GPs like Dr. Henrietta Hughes, England's first ever patient safety commissioner, said that education, not just for medical professionals, but for everyone, is important to help raise awareness about medical misogyny and women's health.
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's about women and people who have periods not necessarily understanding what a normal period is and when it isn't normal. But I think it's also about doctors and other people in primary care having the right time, the right resources and the right support, so that when somebody's presenting with symptoms, that they get the flag on the system to help them make the right tests, make the right diagnosis and refer them on for care.
Alarmingly, a report this week suggested that the rate of women dying during or shortly after birth has ticked up for the first time in 10 years. Former Conservative MP Theo Clarke chaired the UK British Trauma Inquiry and wants to see more done in Parliament to address these issues.
I was very surprised as an MP to hear that there was not a national standardised maternity care policy across the UK. So I would like the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary to implement that. And we also called for a maternity commissioner who'd be responsible for implementing this. And I think if the government implemented both of those two headline recommendations, it would help.
We're heading towards the magical time of year when we begin to wrap up some of the 2024 highlights because, let's be real, it's the season for some serious brain rot. Yep, it seems we're doom scrolling our way into 2025 with a word to finally describe skibbity toilet meme overload and all those mindless online binges that left you wondering where the hours went. To help us break it down, we've got the Smart 7 resident tech elf joining us, Will Guyatt. Will, brain rot is a vibe and it's Oxford Word of the Year, but what does it actually mean?
This is a term that describes the negative psychological and cognitive effects of consuming low-quality content or spending excessive amounts of time on digital media online. And depending on who you're chatting to, they might even actually be referring to the content itself as brain rot.
Do you think it just describes the internet being the internet, or is tech evolving to keep us addicted?
I think it describes the race to the bottom we're facing perfectly. Journalists are forced to write dozens of pointless articles a shift purely to wrap advertising around, or the fact that the internet itself is actually getting dumber as content generated by AI is now training AI, which makes it worse at generating content. But that still saves the media bosses a couple of quid an hour. Now, as you can tell, I could chunter on about this for hours, but I won't.
Google's groundbreaking quantum chip was released this week. Why has it got everyone talking?
Quantum computing takes the principle of quantum mechanics, which the late physicist Stephen Hawking could still explain better than me. But in short, traditional computers process data like a light switch, they're on or off, whereas a quantum computer is a bit like a dimmer switch, and that could be on and off and everything in between at the same time, meaning it can make complex calculations much quicker than anything else ever seen. Now, this has got lots of people excited because this new chip takes just 5 minutes to solve a problem that would currently take the world's fastest supercomputer 10 septillion years to complete. That's 24 zeros after the 1, if you were wondering.
What kind of real-world applications can we expect to see powered by Willow?
Now, admittedly, Google have been quite selective in choosing how to benchmark this chip, because you'd choose me for a cake eating contest and not the 100-metre sprint. But this jump is still quite large and brings us closer to a world where quantum computing might exist outside of $1 billion lab. Quantum computing is still a long way away, and it will probably never be in your pocket because you might not actually need it, because traditional computers do most things pretty well. But it's going to be a game changer in cracking some of life's biggest remaining questions: cure for cancer, accurate weather modelling, longer lasting batteries. There's tons of stuff that being able to compute huge mathematical equations will be able to solve.
Blinking lights have been seen in the sky in New Jersey on tech the size of cars. These drones sound like they're straight out of a Hollywood blockbuster. What have the authorities said about them?
So far, the FBI have appealed for information, and the Pentagon have denied claims by a local senator that there's, and I quote, a giant Iranian drone mothership off the US coast. In the minds of many on social media, it's all getting a little bit Independence Day, and that senator has recently clapped back by saying the Pentagon is lying to you. Very interesting times in America.
The mystery factor here is huge, and without going full conspiracy theorist, how likely is it that we're dealing with advanced government or corporate tech versus, say, hobbyists with just too much free time?
It's hard to say, but there does appear to be footage of these unusual drones in the sky, which backs up people's suggestions. But given they're flying at night, it's almost impossible to judge the size and just how high they are in the sky. What's weird though is that we've now had sightings of unexpected drones in both the UK and US. My completely unfounded prediction is these are in fact military drones being tested. They're an unusual sight in the sky unless you're my parents, who live next to the UK Army's drone facility training facility somewhere in Wiltshire.
And going back to Google, their end-of-year search trends are out. What have we been obsessively searching in 2024?
Oasis became the most searched band of the year, and how to get Oasis tickets was the second biggest trending how-to question of 2024. Details of the Euro 2024 football finals in July, which saw England lose, were the most searched term, while the tragic death of Liam Payne was the most searched news story of the year.
What does this year's list say about us as a society? Were there any surprises, Will?
This list now portrays the interests and habits of the UK, as most of us take to the internet to find out about stories we hear about elsewhere or want to chat about with friends and colleagues. As for the surprises of the year, for me, Beetlejuice being the most searched film of the year, or the young darts prodigy Luke Littler being named Athlete of the Year. Folks also searched for how to block people on TikTok. That made it into the top 10 questions of the year too.
Still to come this Sunday 7, we count the cost of recycling tech and get the latest from NASA. Have you had a go at the UK's Intelligence, Cyber and Security Agency annual brain teaser yet? It tries to replicate the kind of skills needed to work in government communications with puzzles and challenges. And although they say it's mainly for school kids, it's surprisingly tricky. The aim is to decode the names of UK landmarks through code-breaking maths and lateral thinking skills. And Keast-Butler is the director of the Government Communications Headquarters and wants to show the fun side of STEM subjects.
The work we do on national security is really serious. but that doesn't mean we need to take ourselves totally seriously. And so we find that this Christmas card, which over a third of secondary schools across the UK have already downloaded, is a really fun way of connecting to the next generation of puzzlers. Puzzling is at the heart of the problems that we try and solve here, and so using that to inspire people to think about how maths or science or technology or language can help them have a career in the future is really important.
She spoke to BBC Breakfast, who got to go behind the scenes and talk to the spies working with the secrets inside. One anonymous person who was a bit cagey spoke about their outlook on the top secret work they do.
I think we're living in an extraordinary, complex and scary time, and I think things are changing, but I couldn't tell you whether we are winning as such. I think it's a very interesting time, and it will be very interesting over the next few years as we go forward.
The challenge aims to get more kids interested in government, security and tech jobs. And Keast-Butler said teamwork was an important skill to get through the challenge.
We want you to be thinking about those future careers, whether that's with us or in the wider national security or just more broadly in STEM. It's an area that our future rests on, and so inspiring that generation feels really important.
Here's a shocking statistic. People in the UK throw away 1.6 million tonnes of electrical waste every year. Now, in a move to tackle this, the government is putting pressure on online shops to help. That's a gadget graveyard for everything you've ever thrown away, from your first ever laptop to your last sandwich maker. And it costs money to recycle all of that tech trash you've accumulated. The government wants companies like Amazon and eBay to chip in towards the cost of processing the junk safely and responsibly, which usually falls to other retailers and local councils. Libby Peake from the environmental think tank Green Alliance spoke to BBC Radio 4 today's programme about why change is important.
These changes are definitely needed to close loopholes that have been getting ever bigger as the way that we shop has changed. So, as you say, most producers do pay into a pot to cover the costs of the electronics that they place on the market. And that does include online marketplace insofar as they're selling their own products. But when overseas sellers are selling on the marketplaces, they haven't so far been made to ensure that they're also paying into the pot and meeting their legal requirement.
Still to come in the Sunday 7, a quademic could be on the way, and we look at a robot that helps to rear cows.
Right after this. Welcome back.
NASA is delaying its mission to the moon once again. The much anticipated Artemis 2 has been pushed back to no earlier than April 2026. The team remains optimistic, emphasising that delays are essential for the safety and success of missions. Bill Nelson, NASA's administrator, broke the news about delaying sending astronauts around the moon. He discussed the technical challenges with the Orion's heat shield and the Artemis 1 test flight. They're proceeding carefully.
We are planning for Artemis 2 to launch in 2030. We need to get this test flight right, this Artemis 2 test flight right, to ensure the success of our return to the moon and then return safely to Earth in order for the rest of the Artemis campaign to proceed. Space is demanding, and we and our industry and international partners need this time to make sure that the Orion capsule is ready to safely deliver our astronauts to deep space and back to Earth.
Artemis 2 is critical for paving the way for Artemis 3, the mission that will land astronauts on the lunar surface for the first time in over 50 years, which will now be mid-2027. And as Donald Trump takes over as US president, there'll be a change of leadership at the space agency, with Nelson stepping down and billionaire businessman cum astronaut Jared Isaacman due to step up as the next administrator of NASA. He spoke recently at the Space Power Conference.
I love all about commercial space industry right now. Just to point out, they are all generally doing the same thing, which is putting a lot of their own dollars on the line because they believe in the future that it holds. There's so much uncertainty around it too, right? Like there will almost assuredly be some space economy that's up there, and then we're going to need a lot of people in this room to protect it when it fully develops. You know, Blue Origin's putting a ton of their own money on the line. Love everything that Rocket Lab did is like another small scrappy startup that's doing great things, and for sure SpaceX and their approach of like fully reusable first and second stage, pretty awesome stuff. I mean, this is going to allow us to experiment in really, really grand ways.
It's officially hit the time of year when almost everyone feels under the weather, but health professionals are warning about a so-called quademic this winter. The flu and COVID-19, along with the norovirus and respiratory syncytial virus, which is also known as RSV, are piling the pressure on hospital wards across the UK. Chris Hobson, the NHS's Chief Strategy Officer, explained just how serious this challenge is.
We are busier at this point than we've ever been before, so we're seeing record demand. What we're particularly worried about is this idea of a quademic, where effectively you've talked about flu, 70% up in a week, 3.5 to 4 times more people with flu in hospital beds than last year, but we're also seeing significantly higher cases of norovirus compared to the year before. COVID at the moment is low, but to be frank, we are expecting it to kind of come back and increase over the next few weeks. So you've got all 4 things happening at once at a point when we know the service does kind of come under particular pressure.
And it's not just the number of cases that's concerning, it's how quickly these viruses can spread, with many worried that pressures are yet to peak. The National Medical Director for NHS England, Professor Sir Stephen Powis, has this advice for staying safe.
From the public's perspective, vaccination helps. So there is still time to get your flu jab and get your COVID jab. We've got another week before the booking system closes for the winter. So if you're eligible and you haven't had that jab, it's not too late to get it. You can really help.
When you hear the word swag, what comes to mind? Blinged out rappers? Someone sneaking off with a bag of loot? Probably not an AI farmhand, but Swagbot is a futuristic cattle herder designed at the University of Sydney. It helps prevent soil damage and makes farming more sustainable, which is important for Australia, being one of the world's biggest beef exporters. Here's one of the geniuses behind the AI, agriculturist, Professor of Robotics, Salas Sukkarayan.
You want to move the animals to the right part of the pasture where there's good protein, good carbs, and you don't want them to overgraze, you want them to move to the next part of the pasture. And you want to be able to do that in a very fluid manner without fences and so forth.
Not only does it keep an eye on the health of the herd, but it's looking after the earth too. Farmer Erin O'Neill explains how the tech is revolutionary in animal care.
It allows us to assess our paddocks in real time in a much more detailed way than what you can now, because that allows us to know what bits of pasture are most nutritious, particularly if you've got cattle like we do who are pregnant and therefore need a higher quality pasture to aid them through that pregnancy bit.
This has been the Sunday 7. Wherever you're listening, do us a favour and hit the follow button. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. with the regular Smart 7. Have a great rest of your weekend.